And thank you everyone for taking some time out on your Tuesday to come spend some time with us to talk about this course and J.R.R. Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings. Um, so I think I would like to take a little time to just say some things about the course, to unpack a few themes that we'll be exploring in greater depth in the course. And then, considering the size of the group, I think we can really open up for questions, for dialogue. That always brings forward more material, both in terms of the practical side of what this course contains and could become, and also, anything else that you're wanting to ask about while we have this time together. I see a few familiar faces here, so it's really nice to see some of you who I've seen in years past. Thanks for coming to today's session. I'm really excited to be offering this particular course for Cosmos Institute. Uh, I was not going to teach this course, and then basically the the offer was too tempting. Cosmos Institute is too beautiful in terms of what has been created here. And so a big reason that I'm offering this course, honestly, is just in support of this beautiful, fairly new program that's out in the world. And I'm just so impressed with the teachers that you're bringing together, the subjects that you're covering. And so I wanted to be part of that, and it felt really timely to offer a course on Tolkien because of our current moment. And the I have taught courses on The Lord of the Rings for a number of years, and every single time it feels like, oh, well, this is the moment where it's most relevant. This is the moment where reading this story really does reflect what's happening in the collective zeitgeist. And that says something, that it not only continues to be applicable, but seems to be even more applicable. And so I wanted to start us off by saying something a little bit about Tolkien's intention behind this tale. Tolkien somewhat famously said that he disliked allegory in all its manifestations. And an allegory is when uh, an author writes a story and everything in the story stands in for something else. Uh, a good example of this, which is a beloved story to many, is C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia, particularly The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And it's a strong allegory for the Christian mythos, where Aslan, the lion, stands in for the figure of Christ. You have the two female figures who stand in for the two Marys. You have the betrayal of one of the brothers. Edmund stands in for Judas, and so forth. There's other characters there that there aren't a one-to-one equivalent, but basically we see this death rebirth mystery that takes place in that story. And Lewis was very intentional that this was a Christian allegory. And now, there is other research out there, for example, from the scholar Michael Ward, who recognized other layers of symbolism in the Chronicles of Narnia, seeing that the seven Narnian tales actually perfectly align with the medieval understanding of the seven visible planets. So we can't just say, well, this is a strict allegory, because there's clearly layers of symbolism. But Tolkien, who was very close friends with C.S. Lewis. We wouldn't have The Lord of the Rings without C.S. Lewis. We wouldn't have most of Lewis's writings without Tolkien. So they supported each other, they inspired each other, they created a kind of rivalry with each other. And in his curmudgeonly way, Tolkien was strongly against allegory. And so when we look at a very long epic tale, such as The Lord of the Rings, and we think, oh, well, this character means this, or this scene can be understood as reflecting, just to give you an example, The Lord of the Rings was published in 1954 and 1955 in 3 volumes. And everyone thought, well, this is clearly an allegory for the Second World War. And Tolkien said, no, it isn't. And many of the things that he wrote that seemed to be allegorical for the Second World War, he actually wrote years or sometimes even just mere months before those events unfolded in the collective. So there was a kind of resonance happening there between his story writing and what was happening in the world. But he said, no, it's not an allegory for that. And if anything, it was much more inspired by the First World War, in which he fought as a young man. But we can also find much earlier historical precedents for what we see in the Lord of the Rings, the conflicts between Europeans and the Moors, for example. That's one that my husband Max has pointed out to me that he's seen. Um, and there's a lot of other different kind of historical analyses. But what Tolkien said was, rather than being understood as allegory, the Lord of the Rings can rather be interpreted through the lens of applicability. Applicability. And this is why the story continues to be relevant, because he has woven a complex myth that is able to reflect uh, the evolving human historical experience. And so every time I've reread this book, every time I've now taught it in different contexts, I have found that there is a mirroring that takes place not only between what's unfolding in the story and what's unfolding in the collective sphere at that time, but also for individuals' personal lives. And they may see their own personal story reflected in something that's happening for one of the characters or a few of the characters. And then the next time they read it, it's a totally different set of characters that they identify with, that they feel this resonance with. And so there's these levels of applicability, at least 2 levels, that are unfolding anytime we return to this story or we read it for the first time. And I think that in our own time, where one can feel a deep sense of um, anxiety, fear, hopelessness, malaise, disorientation, disillusionment, um, a kind of questioning not only of the authority figures in our um, human world, but even in some ways, a questioning of the larger uh, spiritual framework that we find ourselves in. What kind of world are we living in at this time that um, such events as we're seeing these days are even possible? Um, and so I'm not specifically making um, one-to-one connections right now between what's happening collectively and what unfolds in the story for 2 reasons. One, I imagine that as I'm speaking, you're all drawing your own connections. You're drawing your own connections between what's happening in the political sphere, in the ecological sphere, in terms of uh, economy and philosophy and worldview. But you're probably also drawing connections to events unfolding in your personal life. And so I'm leaving that open because we may all be recognizing the same applicability, but also we might be having differing experiences here. And the second reason that I'm not drawing very concrete parallels is because I imagine at least some of you who are here considering taking this course have not read this story. And so, something that I'm very careful with whenever I teach The Lord of the Rings is to make sure that those few people who have never had the great joy of reading this story get to do so with fresh eyes, that they get to go on this journey and encounter the people, encounter the places, uh, and see them for the first time, encounter them in a new way. And I know that our cultural sphere is saturated by images from Tolkien's world at this point. We have film adaptations, we have television series spin-offs that may go somewhat far afield from Tolkien's original writing. We have paintings, we have drawings, we have drama, we have music, and it's amazing to see how so many artists and authors and creatives have taken the story that came through Tolkien and been able to carry it forward in so many more art forms. And this was a dream of Tolkien's. This was something that he hoped would happen, that he wanted to sketch out a mythology that he would write some of the stories in great detail, others he would kind of do broader brushstrokes, and then give it to the world. And so others could take up their art forms, their musical instruments, their paintbrushes, their pens for script writing and acting abilities for drama, and they could take this story further. Um, and that's what we see in a true living mythology. We see that done with the great myths that we've inherited from Greece or the Nordic cultures or from India or the great Mayan cosmologies or the Yoruba pantheons. They live forward um, through different artists' creative expressions. We rewrite the myths again and again in modern novels and films and music and so forth. And Tolkien's story has taken on that level of cultural significance. So, in this course, we're going to be looking at the many ways that Tolkien's tale is applicable to our own time, applicable to our own lives, recognizing both the influences upon it and the influences from it uh, in relation to the collective, and generally diving deeply into this story so that by the time you reach the end of this course, um, I would like every student to walk away feeling like they have fully lived this tale. I want your autumn to look like not only whatever's unfolding in your personal life, but that you've actually gone on a journey with these figures through the remarkable land that is called Middle Earth, which, as Tolkien said, is our Earth. Middle Earth is our Earth, but in an imaginary time. And so, what we're going to be doing together in this course is entering into that time of the imaginal together and weaving those inner worlds together with our outer world.